My name is Kelly Gillespie. I'm with Networks Plus in Blue Valley. Today we're going to do a teriyaki marinade for beef jerky. I came across this marinade making dumplings one time, Chinese dumplings, and the sauce to dip it in was a soy sauce based, and I thought that would make a great teriyaki, so I just swapped out the teriyaki or the soy sauce for teriyaki. And but it's a very simple recipe. And all you need is a 1/4 cup of teriyaki sauce, 2 tablespoons of rice vinegar, 1 teaspoon of sesame seed oil, a tablespoon of brown sugar, 1 green onion, 1 garlic clove. And then at the end, I'll show you, you can either sprinkle some red pepper if you want some heat to it, or some black pepper if you want to add that, if you like that pepper type of jerky. For meat, leaner is better. This just happens to be a bottom end roast. I had the butcher slice it into 1/8 inch thick slices for me. It was approximately a 2-pound roast, and you want to trim off any excess fat that you can. So with that, I guess we'll get started. First thing is that we're going to use a 1/4 cup of the teriyaki. Slow pouring teriyaki apparently. And I'm going to add that to a bowl. You can either, you're going to have to heat the teriyaki because we want to dissolve a tablespoon of brown sugar into it. And I do a packed, it doesn't, a packed tablespoon. So a tablespoon of brown sugar into our teriyaki. You can either do this next step over in a pot over a stove. I'm going to throw it in the microwave and heat it up. I use a light brown sugar for this, but you can use any of the brown sugars if you want to add that distinct flavor from the darker brown sugars. And we'll say 40. Press start. Oh, it's already set up for 8 seconds. Shouldn't take very long for us to get done with this. Like I said, we're just heating it up enough so that it wants to dissolve. Oh yeah, that's warm now. And as you can see at the bottom, you already see the brown sugar starting to dissolve a little bit and starting to clear up. So we'll stir it until it's all dissolved. We may throw it back in there to reheat it a little bit. And we'll keep doing that until we get all the brown sugar. And you see it is starting to dissolve, and you're seeing less and less of that brown sugar in there. We want to get it all dissolved in there so we get a nice coating with our marinade. Stick it back in here and heat it up for about another 10 seconds maybe. And I use this for venison. If I'm fortunate enough to harvest a deer in the fall, I like making venison. This is where it really shines, I think, because making jerky, I don't know that you save any money making your own beef jerky over buying it, but if you happen to have a beef or a deer, you can most definitely make a very simple and delicious tasting jerky out of it with this recipe. And if you like the Chinese dumplings, you can still use it as a sauce to dip those in too. And we're stirring it up there. I'm just looking to see if I got it out of the bottom. Most of the granules, once I see all the brown sugar granules gone from the bottom of it there, and we're done. Stir it up and just take another peek. Yep, all of it seems to be gone and dissolved in there. So like that, we'll set this to the side and let it cool. While that's cooling, we'll prepare our next ingredients, the ones that we need to cut up, which will be a garlic clove and a green onion. We'll cut the little ends off our green onion here. Toss it there. And we'll just slice it up into the thin slices and just use it. Calls for 1 green onion. If you like the flavor of onion, you can always add more. If you don't like it, you can leave it out and substitute it with something like ginger or even more garlic. You're just trying to add a little bit more flavor. Let's peel that off there. It doesn't need to go. And so you just change that flavor profile just a little bit, because this is going to get poured over the meat, and then we'll let it dissolve in or marinate over the meat for a few hours, and then it'll be ready to dehydrate. But doesn't have to be too fine. Just cut it down so you can fit it all inside your little mixing bowl or pot. Like I said, you can heat that up with a saucepan and melt it in there. So like that, we got our onion done. We'll just go ahead and add in there. It shouldn't be hot enough to cook it, so we'll just shove that off over into our teriyaki there. We got our garlic clove. You can press it or you can cut it up. I like to smash them a little bit. That makes it easier to get all your peel off. It comes right off like that once you smash her down. And then it also helps get some of those juices released. And then I'll chop it up into little finer pieces. And it doesn't take too much, but you can see with that little smashing action there, it broke it up fairly nicely. It doesn't take forever to get it cut up into small pieces at that point. Like I said, when you mash it, it's kind of like mashing apples or grapes, making juice. You get some of those juices out and ready to blend in. Next we'll add is our 2 tablespoons of our rice vinegar. We'll just use the same tablespoon, but we're adding 2 tablespoons of that. And then we're going to add 1 teaspoon of sesame seed oil. And that's pretty much it for the seasonings. Let's take the back end of the measuring spoon here and stir it in, get it mixed up. Like I said, it shouldn't be terribly hot, so it shouldn't cook anything or anything like that. And as long as you can hold it, should be ready to go over the meat. And again, this meat was a roast that I had the butcher chop up into or slice down into about 1/8 inch thick pieces. And then we're just going to pour this over the top. And we will let it set and marinate for a few hours. I think longer better, like overnight, but you don't have to do it that long. You can let it soak for a couple of hours and it'll be good. And we'll come back and add this to our, I use a dehydrator to dehydrate the meat, but you don't have to use a dehydrator. If you have an oven, you set it on the lowest setting. If it's got a warm setting, that's great. But you can set it on the low setting and just lay it across the rack, crack the oven a little bit, and let it dehydrate inside your oven. So you don't need a dehydrator or anything super special. In an oven, you have to check it a little bit more often because it will dehydrate it a lot faster. Right now, I'm just working in their marinade into the different layers of the meat. So that way we can come back and stick it on our dehydrator. We're back. We've let the meat marinade for a little while. I prefer overnight. A lot of times I'll make this recipe in the evenings, so that way I can throw it in the refrigerator, let it marinate overnight, and then I can check on it throughout the day, especially if I'm doing it in the oven. I can check on it throughout the day and make sure I don't over dry it, because then it becomes real brittle and the texture, and it becomes hard. Not unedible, but just gets a weird texture and becomes hard. What we're going to do now is take our marinated meat slices. We're going to dump them out on a tray. And the reason is, at this time is when I like to add things like crushed black pepper, or a coarse black pepper, or crushed red pepper, if you want to add additional flavors. So we're going to lay our strips out pretty flat. I don't remove any of the onion or garlic from it. That stuff will dry just fine inside of the dehydrator or oven. You can remove it if to you it doesn't look how you want it to look. I don't think it takes anything or adds anything other than when you're eating it, you get a little piece of dried onion. So let's get it all laid out here. We may have to do it in a couple waves, but well, that's a pretty long piece, so we're just going to split it, make it a little smaller, easier to manage and handle here. So we're going to take our pepper here, and we're not going to do all of it because not everybody likes real hot and spicy. So we're just going to sprinkle some crushed red pepper over a few of these here. That's probably good there. And then we'll flip it and we'll repeat. And then we'll get it put on our dehydrator here in a second. And again, you can add as much or as little as you want. You remember the marinade itself, that's kind of the base marinade, and you can experiment with the flavors as you wish. So you can come up with your own flavor profile. You can add more or less sugar. You can add salt if you want it to be saltier. If you want it to be saltier, you could, instead of doing teriyaki, you could probably do soy sauce, or mix soy sauce and teriyaki if you want it to be a little saltier flavored meat. So there's a lot of things that we can do. The main thing when I'm layering this in my dehydrator or in my oven is making sure I have just a little bit of space. You know, you don't want it touching the edge completely. I don't need a lot of space, but you want to be able to get the airflow. You don't want the meat touching the meat next to it. You want to make sure you have airflow around it. You don't want it laying on top of each other. So that way you can get the air to go all the way around it and help dry out your meats and get them dried and safe to eat. And once it's done, you can store it inside of your refrigerator for and it'll stay in there. I've had them in there for probably a month or more. You can throw it in your freezer if you really want to preserve it for a long time. The rest of this, I don't think I'm going to add any pepper to. Like I said, not everybody likes it hot. We're not going to do anything, and this will just be straight teriyaki. I did make some of this because it'll take a few hours to dry. Let me wash my hands real quick. And we'll show you, because I'm going to need my other tray. Again, this is probably a little less than a pound of meat. I think it's about 13 ounces. I got a 2-pound roast. By the time I trimmed the fat off of it, I ended up with about, instead of 36 ounces, I probably ended up with just under 30 ounces of meat. So it's somewhere around 13 ounces of meat, just under a pound. So this is kind of what it'll turn out as after it's dehydrated. I did this last night, so I'd have some to be able to show the finished. And you can see I didn't take any of the stuff off. If you look close, you can see some. I used crushed or coarse black pepper on this. I sprinkled it over before I did all of that. So we'll take this out so we can use those trays and have plenty of room for the rest of it. And again, it's if you catch meat on sale and you don't know what to do with it, it's there and you're like, oh, what can we do with this big roast? Trim the fat off of it. I do hand slice it with a knife down to this thin. It just so happens when I was doing this, I caught some meat on sale, and I asked the butcher if they could just cut it down into these 1/8 inch strips, and they were more than happy and willing to do that. So it saved me a little bit of time, energy, and effort, and I got them more consistent because they're probably a lot better at doing that than I am. Other than that, I hope you enjoy.